My name is Melissa Carrington, and I'm about to tell you how I went from being the family doormat to owning the very ground they stood on. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but sometimes it needs to be served with legal documents and a set of keys. The morning it all began started like any other Sunday at my parents' house in Vermont, the same weathered Victorian that had witnessed 34 years of my life. Most of them spent being invisible while my younger sister Bianca sparkled like fool's gold in our parents' eyes. I was arranging deviled eggs on my grandmother's china platter while Sophie, my 6-year-old daughter, played upstairs with her coloring books. The September air drifted through open windows, carrying the scent of maple and the false promise of family harmony. "Melissa, those eggs look pathetic," my mother Eleanor observed from her perch at the kitchen island, her manicured nails tapping against her wineglass even though it was barely noon. "You should have let Bianca handle the appetizers. She has such a gift for presentation." I bit back the response that Bianca's idea of cooking involved ordering from her phone and transferring takeout to serving dishes. Instead, I focused on the methodical task of sprinkling paprika, each dash a small rebellion against the narrative that I could do nothing right. "Speaking of gifts," my father Gregory chimed in from behind his newspaper, "Bianca just closed another big sale at the boutique. Commission alone was more than your monthly teacher's salary." The boutique, the one they'd invested their retirement savings in so their precious younger daughter could play dress-up with other people's money. The same parents who told me college loans would build character when I'd asked for help with tuition. "That's wonderful," I managed, my voice steady from years of practice. Bianca swept in then, all false eyelashes and designer perfume that couldn't mask the smell of last night's wine. At 31, she still lived in what used to be our shared childhood bedroom, though she'd long since erased any trace of my existence from it. "Oh, good. You're here," she said, not to me but to the room in general, as if my presence was merely incidental. "I need someone to watch the store Tuesday. I have a spa appointment." "I teach Tuesday," I reminded her. She rolled her eyes. "Can't you just call in sick? It's not like finger painting with children is brain surgery. I teach art to middle schoolers. And no, I can't just abandon my students for your massage." "This is why you'll always be poor," she sighed dramatically. "No vision, no flexibility, right, Daddy?" Gregory grunted his agreement without looking up. Eleanor poured Bianca wine despite the early hour. I returned to my eggs, each one a small, perfect accomplishment they'd never acknowledge. That's when I heard it, the sound that would change everything. A series of thumps, too rapid and heavy to be footsteps, followed by a sickening crack and a scream that turned my blood to ice. "Sophie!" I dropped the platter. Eggs and china shattered across the floor as I ran. In the hallway, at the bottom of the steep Victorian stairs, my daughter lay crumpled like a discarded doll. Blood seeped from a gash on her forehead, and her left arm bent at an angle that made my stomach lurch. "Mommy," she whimpered, and I fell to my knees beside her, afraid to move her, afraid not to comfort her. "Don't move, baby. You're okay. Mommy's here." Above us, Bianca leaned over the banister, and the expression on her face stopped my heart. She was smirking. "Relax," she called down. "She just slipped. Kids are so clumsy." "What happened?" I demanded, cradling Sophie's head in my lap while fishing for my phone. I told her the upstairs was for adults only. She didn't listen. Bianca examined her nails. "It was just a little nudge, a joke." "A joke?" The word came out as a whisper, then a roar. "You pushed my daughter down the stairs as a joke?" Eleanor appeared in the hallway, stepping carefully around the spreading blood. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Melissa, don't be so dramatic. Check if you got blood on the Persian runner." I stared at my mother, then at the antique carpet she was so concerned about, then at my daughter's pale face. Sophie's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and frightened. "Aunt Bianca pushed me," she said, her voice small and certain. "She said I was in her way." "She's confused," Gregory said, finally joining the scene. "Bianca would never. The stairs are old. The carpet's loose. We've been meaning to fix it." "We should sue the previous owners," Eleanor added. "This is clearly a liability issue." As I called 911, my family continued their discussion about carpets and lawsuits, and everything except the fact that my sister had just admitted to pushing a 6-year-old down a flight of stairs. Bianca had wandered off to check her phone. My parents were examining the stair runner for defects they could blame. The EMTs arrived within minutes that felt like hours. They fitted Sophie with a neck brace as a precaution, strapped her to a board, and I climbed into the ambulance beside her. As we pulled away, I saw my family through the back windows. They were already heading inside, probably to finish the wine and appetizers, the inconvenience of the afternoon behind them. The emergency room smelled of antiseptic and fear. Other people's tragedies played out in curtained spaces while I held Sophie's hand and waited. The doctor, a kind woman with gray streaks in her hair, cleaned and stitched the gash on Sophie's forehead. 12 stitches, she said. It'll leave a scar, but hair will cover most of it. Her arm is badly bruised but not broken. She's lucky. Falls like that can be fatal. Lucky. My 6-year-old was lucky to survive being pushed down a flight of stairs by an adult who thought it was funny. Kids fall, the doctor continued, making notes on her tablet. But this seems like quite a tumble. You said she was playing upstairs? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to tell her everything, to file a report, to have Bianca arrested, but I knew how it would go. My parents would hire lawyers. They'd paint me as hysterical, vindictive, trying to destroy the family over an accident. They'd make it about the carpet. Yes, I said finally. She was playing upstairs. The doctor gave me a long look but didn't press. She prescribed pain medication and told me to watch for signs of concussion. Then Sophie and I were alone in the curtained space, waiting for discharge papers. "Mommy?" Sophie's voice was thick with medication but clear. "Why did Aunt Bianca push me?" I smoothed her hair back from the bandage. "I don't know, sweetheart." "Does Grandma hate me?" She cared more about her rug than my head. 6 years old, and she'd already learned the truth I'd spent 3 decades trying to deny. In this family, objects mattered more than people. Status mattered more than safety. And Bianca's cruelty would always be excused while my daughter's pain would always be dismissed. "No, baby," I lied. "Grandma doesn't hate you." But as I signed the discharge papers with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking, I made a decision. They could dismiss me. They could mock me. They could treat me like the hired help at family gatherings. But they would never, ever hurt my daughter again. That night, after Sophie was safely asleep in our small apartment, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad. For years, I'd been saving money, not just from my teaching salary, which barely covered our expenses, but from a side business I'd never told my family about, buying and flipping furniture, selling my artwork online, even ghostwriting romance novels under a pen name. Every penny squirreled away for Sophie's college fund, for our future, for someday. Someday had just arrived ahead of schedule. I made a list, not a grocery list or a to-do list, but a battle plan. At the top, in bold letters, I wrote, "Take back what's mine." My phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. "Hope Sophie is fine. Can you bring a dessert next Sunday? Bianca is too busy." I stared at the message. Hope Sophie is fine. Not asking if she was okay. Not offering to visit. Not even pretending to care. Just assuming I'd show up next week with dessert and a smile, ready for another round of casual cruelty. I typed back, "Of course." Then I opened my laptop and began researching property records. The Carrington family home sat on 2 acres of prime Vermont real estate, worth a fortune now. Though my parents had inherited it from my father's mother 40 years ago when the neighborhood was less desirable, they'd never bothered to tell me the full story of the house's ownership, always implying it had been in the family for generations. But property records don't lie, even if families do. The house had never belonged to my parents, not technically. According to the documents I found, my grandmother had sold it to her best friend, Mrs. Adelaide Winters, for $1 the year before she died. Some tax arrangement, probably. Or maybe she'd known even then that her son and daughter-in-law would squander any inheritance. Mrs. Winters had then rented it back to my parents for 40 years at below market rates, honoring her friend's wishes. Mrs. Winters. I remembered her vaguely from childhood, a quiet woman who'd attended a few holiday dinners, always watching our family dynamics with sharp eyes. She'd stopped coming around when I was in high school. My parents said she'd become too frail to travel. A quick search revealed she was 91 and living in an assisted care facility 2 towns over. I looked at Sophie's sleeping form on the couch, her bandage white in the darkness, and made another decision. Tomorrow was Monday. I'd take a sick day, not to watch Bianca's boutique, but to pay a visit to Mrs. Adelaide Winters. The Sunshine Manor. Assisted living smelled like cafeteria food and industrial-strength air freshener. Mrs. Winters' room was on the 3rd floor, overlooking a small garden where residents could pretend they weren't trapped by age and circumstance. She was smaller than I remembered, bird-like in her recliner, but her eyes were still sharp when they fixed on me. "Melissa Carrington," she said before I could introduce myself. "You look just like your grandmother. Same determination in your jaw." "You remember me?" "I remember everything," she gestured to a chair. "Sit. Tell me why you're here. And don't insult my intelligence by claiming it's a social visit after 20 years. So I told her. About Bianca, about the stairs, about the carpet being more important than my daughter's safety, about years of being the responsible one who got nothing while the reckless one got everything. Mrs. Winters listened without interrupting, her fingers working at the edge of her afghan. "Your grandmother worried about you," she said when I finished. "She saw how they treated you, even then, like Cinderella without the fairy godmother." "Why did she sell you the house?" Mrs. Winters smiled, and suddenly I could see the shrewd businesswoman she must have been. "She didn't trust your parents. Rightfully so. They'd have mortgaged it to the hilt for some scheme or another. So she sold it to me with a handshake agreement. I'd rent it to them cheap as long as they needed it, but I'd always have the right to sell if circumstances changed." My heart hammered against my ribs. "And have circumstances changed?" "That depends." She studied me with those sharp eyes. "What are you prepared to offer?" I named a figure. Market value plus 40,000. Every penny I'd saved, plus what I could borrow against my retirement. It would wipe me out financially, leave me with nothing but my teacher's salary and a mortgage I could barely afford. "That's generous," Mrs. Winters acknowledged. "But I'm not interested in money at my age. What would you do with the house?" I thought of Sophie asking if her grandmother hated her, of Bianca's smirk as my daughter lay bleeding, of my parents stepping around the blood to check their precious carpet. "I'd make it mine," I said, "and then I'd make them leave." Mrs. Winters laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "Your grandmother would have loved that. Draw up the papers, but there are conditions." "Name them." "First, the sale stays quiet until you're ready. Second, you give them proper notice, legal and above board. I won't have my name dragged through courts because you got eager. Third, and most important, you do something good with that house. Your grandmother loved it. Don't let spite be its only legacy." I agreed to everything. We shook hands, her grip surprisingly firm. As I stood to leave, she called me back. "Your parents never visit, 40 years I've kept that roof over their heads at a fraction of its worth, and they've never once asked how I am. But you came. That tells me everything I need to know." The next 4 weeks required Oscar-worthy performances. I showed up to Sunday dinners with desserts and smiles. I let Bianca mock my job, my clothes, my single motherhood. I watched my parents fawn over their youngest while treating Sophie and me like unwelcome obligations, and I said nothing. The papers were drawn up by Mrs. Winters's lawyer, a discreet man who specialized in estate planning. The sale went through quietly, recorded at the courthouse without fanfare. I now owned my childhood home, and my family had no idea. Sophie's scar was healing, though she'd started having nightmares about stairs. She'd wake up crying about falling, about being pushed, about nobody catching her. I held her through these terrors, promising silently that I was done letting her fall. "Why do we still go to Grandma's?" she asked one morning, dark circles under her 2 young eyes. They don't like us. Just a little longer, baby, I promised. Then things will be different. The boutique was failing. I learned this not from Bianca, who continued to brag about her sales figures, but from casual gossip at the coffee shop. Turns out designer clothes don't sell well in a town where most people shop at Target. My parents were hemorrhaging money keeping it afloat, but admitting failure wasn't in their vocabulary. The perfect storm was brewing, and I had front row seats. The final Sunday dinner took place in early October. When the leaves were burning gold and red outside the windows, I'd made apple pie from scratch, which Eleanor criticized for being too sweet while eating 2 slices. Bianca regaled us with tales of a customer who dared to question her expertise on fashion. "Can you imagine," she laughed, "some farmer's wife trying to tell me about style?" I told her maybe she should stick to shopping at Melissa's level. You know, clearance racks and consignment stores. "Nothing wrong with being frugal," Gregory said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Though I suppose when you're successful like Bianca, you can afford to have standards." Sophie sat beside me, quietly drawing in her notebook. She'd become withdrawn since the fall, staying close to me at all times. When she needed to use the bathroom, she looked at the stairs with genuine fear. "I'll come with you," I said, starting to rise. "Oh, let the child go alone," Eleanor snapped. "You coddle her too much. No wonder she's so timid." "She's not timid," I said quietly. "She's cautious. There's a difference." "Cautious," Bianca mimicked in a sing-song voice. "Is that what we're calling it? I was climbing those stairs at 3 years old. Of course, I wasn't clumsy." Sophie's hand tightened on her crayon. I saw it snap in half. "She's not clumsy either," I said, my voice still calm. "She was pushed." The room went silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. "We've discussed this," my father said, his voice heavy with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "It was an accident. The carpet is loose. End of story." "Whose story?" I asked. "Yours? Bianca's? Or the 6-year-old who knows exactly what happened to her?" "You're being ridiculous," Eleanor said. "And frankly, I'm tired of this victim complex you've developed. One little fall and suddenly everyone's against you. One little fall that required 12 stitches and could have killed her. Could have, would have, should have." Bianca waved her hand dismissively. "But didn't, so can we move on? Some of us have actual problems. The boutique's landlord is being completely unreasonable about rent. Daddy, I need you to talk to him again." And just like that, Sophie's trauma was dismissed in favor of Bianca's self-inflicted business woes. I looked at my daughter, saw her shoulders slump in defeat, and felt 34 years of similar dismissals pile up like kindling. "Actually," I said, standing and taking Sophie's hand, "we're leaving." "Dessert isn't even served yet," Eleanor protested. "No," I said. "I mean, we're leaving. For good." My father lowered his newspaper for the first time all evening. "Don't be dramatic. Melissa, you'll be back next week like always." I smiled then, and something in it must have warned them, because Bianca stopped checking her phone and Eleanor set down her wineglass. "No," I repeated, "I won't. Sophie and I are done being your punching bags. Done being the help. Done pretending this is a family." "You're overreacting," Eleanor said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. "All families have their dynamics." "Dynamics?" I laughed, and it felt like breaking free. "Is that what you call letting Bianca push a child down the stairs? A dynamic?" "I didn't push her," Bianca protested. "It was a joke, a little nudge. God, you're so sensitive." "A judge might call it assault," I said conversationally. "But don't worry, I'm not pressing charges. I have something better in mind." "What's that supposed to mean?" Gregory demanded. "You'll find out tomorrow." I walked to the door, Sophie's hand in mine, at the threshold. I turned back to see them all frozen in tableau, Eleanor clutching her pearls, Gregory half risen from his chair, Bianca's mouth open in shock. "Oh, and Mom?" I added. "You might want to start packing. That precious Persian runner is going to need a new home." I closed the door on their confusion and walked to my car through the crisp autumn air. Sophie was quiet until we pulled out of the driveway. "Are we really not coming back?" she asked. "Really?" "Good," she said firmly. "I don't like it there. They're mean to you." "Not anymore, baby. Not anymore." That night, I called Mrs. Winter's lawyer. "Serve the notices tomorrow morning," I said. "All 3 of them. 30 days to vacate." "Are you prepared for the fallout?" he asked. I thought of Sophie's scar, of her nightmares, of 34 years of being less than in the eyes of people who should have loved me most. I've been preparing my whole life. The calls started at 9:17 Monday morning. First Eleanor, shrill and disbelieving. "What is this notice? This has to be a mistake. We own this house." Then Gregory, blustering with rage. "I don't know what game you're playing, but when I find out who's behind this..." Finally Bianca, vindictive and accusing. "You vindictive bitch, you think you can steal our house? I'll destroy you." I let them all go to voicemail. I had a class to teach, and my students were working on self-portraits. Amazing how clearly children could see themselves when given the right tools. By lunch, the texts had evolved from denial to bargaining. Eleanor offered to apologize. "If you're really that sensitive about the carpet comment..." Gregory promised to have a talk with Bianca about being more careful. Bianca offered nothing but threats to sue me for conspiracy and elderly abuse, apparently having Googled Mrs. Winters. The lawyer called it too. "They're seeking an emergency injunction. Judge threw it out. They have no grounds. The sale was legal. The notice is proper. They're scrambling." "Good," I said. "Let them scramble." That evening, I drove by the house. Every light blazed, and I could see figures moving frantically in the windows. Packing, searching for documents that didn't exist, planning their next move. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, I held all the cards. Sophie was staying with my friend Marie for a few days. I'd told her I had some grown-up business to handle, and she'd accepted it with the wisdom of a child who'd learned too young that adults couldn't always be trusted. Marie, a fellow teacher who'd watched my family's treatment of me with growing disgust over the years, had offered before I could ask. "Give them hell," she'd said, hugging me at drop-off, "and then give yourself peace." Tuesday brought lawyers, not the cheap legal aid kind, but sleek sharks in suits who smelled of desperation barely masked by expensive cologne. They came to my apartment with offers and threats in equal measure. "The sale was conducted under duress," one argued. "Mrs. Winters is clearly not competent." "Mrs. Winters' competency has been evaluated and confirmed by 3 separate doctors," I countered. "Would you like copies of the reports?" "This is extortion," another tried, "using family discord for financial gain." "It's a legal real estate transaction. I paid above market value. That's the opposite of extortion." They left with nothing but billable hours to show for it. Wednesday, the emotional manipulation began. Eleanor showed up at my school, tears streaming down her face. The security guard called me to the office, where she waited like a grieving widow. "How could you?" she wailed. "Your father is having chest pains. Bianca can't eat. You're killing us." "You have 30 days' notice," I said calmly. "That's generous. Most evictions give less." "Eviction?" She said the word like it was poison. "We're your family." "No," I corrected. "You're my tenants, and your lease is up." She tried to grab my hands. I stepped back. Years of conditioning screamed at me to comfort her, to apologize, to make it right. But then I thought of Sophie's question. Does Grandma hate me? "I'll make you a deal," Eleanor said desperately. "We'll apologize to Sophie, publicly. We'll admit Bianca pushed her. We'll pay for therapy, plastic surgery for the scar. Anything you want." "Anything I want?" I pretended to consider it. "I want you out of my house." The tears dried instantly, replaced by the cold fury I knew so well. "You'll regret this. No one crosses the Carringtons." "I'm a Carrington too," I reminded her. "And I've been crossed my whole life." By Thursday, they'd moved to scorched earth. Bianca took to social media, painting me as a gold digger who'd manipulated a senile old woman, She posted old family photos with captions about how I'd always been jealous and couldn't stand to see others happy. The comments were brutal. People who didn't know me rushed to judgment. But then something unexpected happened. My students' parents began responding. Stories of how I'd tutored their kids for free, how I'd bought supplies with my own money, how I'd stayed late to help struggling students. Former colleagues chimed in with their own memories. Even some of Bianca's former friends, tired of her treatment of them, began sharing receipts of her lies and cruelties. The narrative shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the villain but the hero of my own story. Friday afternoon, I met with a contractor at the house. My parents were out, probably meeting with more lawyers, but Bianca was there. She tried to block my entrance. "You can't come in here," she said, planting herself in the doorway like a designer-clad gargoyle. "Actually, I showed her the deed. Owner's rights include inspection with proper notice, which I gave your parents yesterday." "This is harassment." "No, this is me measuring for renovations. Feel free to call the police if you'd like. I'm sure they'd be interested in discussing what happened to Sophie." She stepped aside, but followed me through the house, spewing venom with every step. The contractor, a professional who'd seen plenty of family drama, ignored her completely as he took measurements and photos. "Master bedroom could be gorgeous with some work," he noted. "That wallpaper has to go, though." "My mother picked that wallpaper," Bianca shrieked. "Then she can take it with her," I said. We moved through each room, discussing possibilities. The boutique had clearly drained more than just my parents' savings. Furniture was missing, probably sold. The house felt hollow, like it was already acknowledging its change in ownership. In what used to be my childhood bedroom, now Bianca's shrine to herself. I paused. She'd covered every wall with photos of herself. Awards from high school, certificates of participation reframed as achievements. But in the corner, barely visible, was a photo I'd forgotten existed. Bianca and me as children, before the golden child narrative took hold. We were holding hands, smiling, sisters. "Remember when we were friends?" I asked quietly. "We were never friends," she spat. "I was just too young to know better." I nodded, unsurprised but still somehow disappointed. "The contractor will need access next week for more detailed planning. Please make sure your things are secured." "My things? This is my room." "For 25 more days," I corrected. "Then it's just a room." As we prepared to leave, she grabbed my arm. Her nails, perfect as always, dug into my skin. "I will destroy you," she hissed. "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." I looked at her, really looked at her, 31 years old, living in her childhood bedroom, failing at a business funded by parents who'd mortgaged their future for her whims, angry at the world for not bending to her will, pushing children downstairs when they didn't move fast enough. "Everyone already knows what kind of person I am," I said gently. "I'm the kind who protects her daughter, the kind who works hard and saves money, the kind who honors contracts and follows the law. What kind of person are you?" She released my arm, leaving crescent marks in my skin, but for the first time in my life, her violence felt like victory. She was scared. They all were. The natural order of their universe had shifted, and the scapegoat had become the landlord. That weekend, while my family huddled in their borrowed castle plotting their next move, I took Sophie to look at apartments. We needed something bigger than our current place but still affordable on my teacher's salary. The house would generate rental income once renovated, but I'd meant what I'd told Mrs. Winters. I had plans beyond spite. "This one has a purple door," Sophie exclaimed at our third stop. "Purple is my favorite." The apartment was perfect. 2 bedrooms, good school district, and yes, a purple door. The landlord, charmed by Sophie's enthusiasm, offered a lease starting in 30 days, everything aligning like puzzle pieces. That night, Sophie crawled into my bed, something she'd been doing since the fall. "Mommy, are you sad about Grandma and Grandpa?" I considered lying, but she deserved better. "A little. I'm sad they couldn't love us the way we deserved." "But we love each other, right?" "Right. Always and forever." Then we're okay, she yawned. Plus, purple door. Plus purple door, I agreed, holding her close. Monday of week 3 brought surrender, though they'd never call it that. Gregory called, his voice stripped of its usual authority. Let's be reasonable, he began. We found another place, smaller. Of course, the moving costs alone will bankrupt us, not to mention deposits, utilities. And we'd like to negotiate an early exit, leave by Friday, in exchange for... For what? I was genuinely curious what they thought they had to bargain with. For our silence, no more social media posts, no lawsuits, no continued harassment. I laughed, actually laughed. You want me to pay you to stop harassing me? Think of it as a clean break, he pressed. Worth something, surely. Tell you what, I said. Leave by Friday, and I won't charge you for the damage to the hardwood where Sophie's blood stained it. I had it professionally assessed. The refinishing quote is substantial. Silence, then. That's extortion. No, that's generosity. The stain is documented. Photos from the hospital. The EMT report. Amazing what insurance companies require these days. We'll be out by Friday, he said quietly. Get it in writing, I added. And Gregory? That carpet you were so worried about? You can take it, I insist. Moving day arrived gray and drizzling. Weather matching the mood. I didn't go to the house. My lawyer advised against it. And honestly, I didn't trust myself not to gloat. Instead, Sophie and I spent the day painting her new room purple. Because when you match the door, you commit. Marie stopped by with pizza and wine. Juice for Sophie. I drove past your old place earlier. Moving trucks everywhere. Your sister was screaming at the movers about her shoe collection. Sounds right, I said, not feeling the satisfaction I'd expected. Mostly I felt tired. 34 years of emotional labor. Finally coming due. You did the right thing, Marie said, reading my mood. They pushed a child down the stairs. They were lucky you only took their house. I didn't take it, I corrected. I bought it, legal and above board. Still, she raised her glass, to justice served cold with proper documentation. We clinked glasses, and Sophie raised her juice box to join the toast. A week after they moved out, I walked through the empty house with my contractor, my lawyer, and a representative from the local family services organization. The bones of the house were good. My grandmother had loved it, maintained it despite my parents' neglect, but it needed work to become what I envisioned. The basement could be converted to a playroom, the family services rep suggested. Soundproofing for therapy sessions upstairs. The kitchen's big enough for cooking classes. Sophie's Step, I said, the name coming unbidden. That's what I want to call it. They looked at me curiously. My daughter fell down these steps, I explained, running my hand along the banister. But she got back up. That's what this place will be. Somewhere kids can learn to get back up. The contractor nodded. I can work with that. Safety rails, obviously. Better lighting. Maybe carpet runner after all. But new, properly secured. No carpet, I said firmly. Wood, solid and honest, no covering things up. The renovation took 3 months. I'd stop by after school, sometimes with Sophie, watching the house transform, paint colors she helped choose, safety features everywhere. The master bedroom became a counseling space. Bianca's shrine became an art therapy room. My parents' formal dining room became a place where single mothers could gather, share meals and resources, feel less alone. The day before the opening, I found my family there. They stood on the sidewalk, looking at the house they'd lived in for 40 years. Eleanor seemed smaller, Gregory grayer. Bianca wore sunglasses despite the cloudy day. They didn't see me parked across the street, watching them watch their former life. They didn't try to enter, just stood there like ghosts haunting their own past. After 20 minutes, they left. I never saw them again. The grand opening of Sophie's Step brought more people than I'd expected. Teachers, social workers, parents I'd helped over the years. Mrs. Winters came, sharp as ever in her wheelchair, cutting the ribbon with obvious pleasure. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she whispered. "You took something built on cruelty and made it kind." Sophie, healed now except for a thin scar hidden by her bangs, handed out purple ribbons to visitors. She'd insisted on being part of the ceremony. My brave girl who'd learned too young that family could hurt you, but that love could heal you anyway. The first family arrived the next week, a mother and 2 children, fleeing a situation that made my family look functional. They stayed in the emergency apartment on the 3rd floor, the kids attending art therapy in what used to be Bianca's room. Within a month, we were at capacity, helping 3 families transition to safer, stabler lives. I kept teaching, pouring my salary into the house's maintenance while grants and donations covered programs. Sophie and I lived simply in our purple door apartment, rich in ways my family never understood. 1 year later, a package arrived at the center, no return address, but the handwriting was Eleanor's. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was the Persian runner from the stairs. A note was attached. "It was your grandmother's. She'd want you to have it." I stared at it for a long time. This piece of fabric they'd valued more than my daughter's safety. Then I donated it to the Historical Society. Let someone else decide its worth. I had more important things to measure. The local newspaper ran a feature on Sophie's step for its anniversary. They interviewed families we'd helped, took photos of the art therapy room where children learned to express trauma through color and shape. Sophie, now 7 and confident, gave a quote that made me cry. My aunt pushed me down the stairs, but my mom helped me fly instead. The reporter asked if I wanted to comment on the family situation that had led to creating the center. I considered my words carefully. "Sometimes the best thing you can do for toxic people is remove yourself from their reach," I said finally, "and then use that distance to help others escape their own stares." The article went viral. Not Bianca's kind of viral, built on lies and manipulation, but the real kind, touching people who recognize their own stories in ours. Donations poured in. We expanded to the house next door, then the one after that. Sophie's Step became Sophie's Street, a whole block dedicated to helping families rebuild after trauma. I hired staff, good people who understood that sometimes salvation looked like legal documents and locked doors. We offered everything from emergency housing to legal aid to art therapy to simple cooking classes where women learned to feed their families on a budget without shame. 5 years passed. Sophie grew tall and strong, her scar fading to a silver line she wore like a badge of honor. She volunteered at the center, teaching younger kids to paint and draw, to see beauty in broken things made whole. One autumn evening, as I locked up the main house, I saw a familiar figure across the street, Bianca, older now, her designer clothes replaced with retail mainstream. She watched me, and I waited for the familiar rage to rise. Instead, I felt only sadness. I crossed the street. She didn't run, which surprised me. "The place looks good," she said quietly. "I read about it, what you do here." "Thank you." "I never meant," she started, then stopped. "I was always angry at you." "Why?" "Because you were good," she said simply, "and I couldn't stand it. Being the favorite wasn't enough if someone was genuinely good." "I wasn't that good," I said. "I was just trying to survive." "Same thing, maybe." She looked at the house, then back at me. "I'm in therapy now. Court-ordered after a DUI. But still, my therapist says I have narcissistic tendencies complicated by parental enabling." "That sounds about right." "Mom and Dad live in Florida now, small condo. They don't talk about you, or Sophie, or the house. It's like you never existed." "That's probably easier for them." "Is it easier for you?" she asked. I thought about it. The midnight feedings with families in crisis. The grants that fell through. The children who came to us so broken, we wondered if all the art supplies in the world could help them draw their way back to whole. The birthday cards Sophie made for grandparents who'd never see them. The family reunions we'd never attend. The heritage of pain transformed into purpose. "No," I said honestly. "But it's better. Better matters more than easy." She nodded, pulled her coat tighter. "I should go. I wanted to see it, to see what you built from what I tried to break. Bianca, I called as she turned away. The center offers family counseling too, if you ever… Maybe, she said. Someday, when I'm brave enough. Bravery's just fear that's learned to walk forward, I said. Sophie taught me that. She smiled, a real smile, possibly the first I'd ever seen from her that wasn't cruel. Then she walked away, and I let her go. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt, but sometimes you could at least clear the wreckage. Back in our purple door apartment, Sophie was doing homework at the kitchen table. She looked up as I entered, and I saw my grandmother in her eyes, my own determination in her jaw, but something else too, something that was purely Sophie, a joy that trauma hadn't managed to steal. "Good day?" she asked, sounding older than her 11 years. "Good day," I confirmed. "You?" "Got an A on my personal narrative essay. Teacher said it was powerful." "What did you write about?" She grinned. "How my mom bought a house with pennies and turned it into a castle for kids who needed kingdoms." "That's quite a title." "It's quite a story," she said, returning to her homework. I started dinner, listening to her hum while she worked. Outside, Burlington settled into evening, somewhere in Florida. My parents were probably complaining about the humidity. Somewhere in therapy, Bianca was maybe learning to push herself up the stairs she'd pushed others down. And here, in our small kitchen with its purple door view, Sophie and I were home. The house on Maple Street, where I'd learned that family could fail you and carpets could matter more than children, had become something else entirely. Sophie's step had helped 53 families in 5 years, 53 chances for children to learn that falling didn't have to be fatal, that stairs could be climbed again, that sometimes the best revenge against cruelty was aggressive kindness. My phone buzzed. Another referral from family services, another mother, another child, another chance to turn pain into purpose. I confirmed we had space, already planning which therapist would be the best match, which programs might help most. "Mom," Sophie said, looking up from her math, "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For not becoming them. For taking the worst thing and making it the best thing. For showing me that being pushed down doesn't mean you have to stay down." I crossed to her, kissed the top of her head where the scar hid beneath her hair. "I love you too, baby." "I'm not a baby," she protested, but smiled. "You'll always be my baby," I said. "The one worth buying houses for. The one worth losing families for. The one worth everything for." "Mom, you're being sappy." "I'm allowed. I own property. It comes with sappiness rights." She laughed, and the sound filled our small apartment with something better than revenge, better than justice, better than vindication. It filled it with hope. The doorbell rang. Our dinner delivery, because cooking after a long day was sometimes more than I could manage. As I paid the driver, I caught sight of the purple door and smiled. Some people got fairy godmothers, some got Prince Charmings. I got a 91-year-old woman who understood that sometimes the best magic was a properly notarized deed. That was enough, more than enough. Sophie called out menu options, and I called back my choices. And together we settled in for another evening in our happily ever after. Not perfect, not easy, but ours, completely, legally, lovingly ours. And in the house on Maple Street, another child learned to paint their way through trauma. Another mother found resources she didn't know existed. Another family discovered that falling down the stairs didn't have to be the end of the story. It could be just the beginning.